Good afternoon. It's just gone 1 o'clock on Friday, the 1st of August, 2025. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Charles Malet. I'm joined in the studio today by Patrick Henningsen. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Charles.
And on the live link, we have Mark Anderson from the United States and Mike Robinson from Northern Ireland. Now, there'll be a lot to get through today, as always, and we're going to be looking at the possible nuclear capabilities of Iran, as described over in Chicago. We're going to be looking at the latest tariff theatrics, at the UK's plans for food strategy and food security, the BBC, and indeed particularly how they're dealing with the Paloma Shemirani inquest, as well as mass media consolidation in the United States concerning Paramount. But you'll remember from Wednesday's programme that I was reporting via Patrick, who'd sent in some footage of an event he attended in London on Monday to do with the Sumud flotilla. And Sumud, of course, we should point out, meaning the Arabic word for perseverance. Now, I'm pleased to say that Patrick has a lot more on this for today's programme. So that's where we're going to begin today. Patrick.
Thanks, Charles. Yeah, it was just really a rally for, the Handela had just been, this was the Gaza flotilla, had just been seized by the Israelis. We'll bring that up on screen so people see the boat again. But the part of the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, they had the Malet, which was also apprehended a few months ago. The crew was kidnapped and abused by the Israelis. They were all released. The whole crew of the Handela, I think, is safe now, as far as I'm concerned. There might be one or two other exceptions to that, but we'll get clarification on that. But they had a press conference in London, and it was really kind of to bring the press in, to give them more information about what's coming, and also just to hear some of the testimonies of one of the members of the Handela was there. Tiago, had a chance to speak to him as well. But some of the other people who are Human Rights Watch, and also an MEP from Dublin. So this was very revealing. So we have a video report which will show you from this event, and we'll have some of the statements in there, and we'll speak a little bit about what the content of that is afterwards. But let's go ahead and watch this.
Governments must end all complicity, must stop arms, and in fact must impose an arms embargo, a comprehensive arms embargo on Israel immediately.
The situation that we are seeing unfolding in Gaza is the extermination of the Palestinian people. What makes this specific and unique is the fact that this is being carried out by an ally of Western governments. It's being carried out by a state that calls the United Kingdom, the EU, Canada, Australia, a friend. And that is one of the things that clearly distinguishes this situation from others. But obviously, the fact that it is extermination of a people raises it to the level of one of the greatest atrocities that can be committed by a state and by its officials.
We were on the Malet on a mission with 12 people, with food, with medicine, with crutches, with baby formula, with a lot of things like water filters to try to do the obvious things. When we see a genocide, the 8 billion people that see children being starved to death, they know that is wrong. They want to help, they want to bring them food. When they see hospitals, shelters, schools being bombed, children being burned alive. They want to stop that, and that's why we went.
I think that the swift action you've seen, as you say rightly, illegal occupation by Russia, but it's two militaries against each other, and we've seen very quick action by the EU. And I think that that's where now the people across Europe are saying, what, like, the double standards is so blatant, and the level of frustration from us politicians who are, all we're asking for is international law to be upheld. Like, that's the bare minimum we're asking for, is that the same standard is applied to Israel as applied to any other country in the world. It's not going to happen at the EU. I've been back in the European Parliament a year now. I'm the chair of the delegation for relations with Palestine, and I've repeatedly said you will not get a consensus at the EU level. So therefore it is not just the legal thing that a member state does, but it's also the morally right thing to do, that they take unilateral action. So Ireland has had this bill called the Occupied Territories Bill since 2018. It passed all stages in our Parliament, but it was blocked by the Irish government for years. The campaign to reignite that bill, obviously since 2023, has now gotten to the point where we're almost ready now for the government to enact it. But I really do believe that if Ireland shows that courage, and let's not forget, this is just to enact the ICJ ruling of July 2024, that the proceeds of crime from illegal settlements should not be sold, that if we do that, it'll be the first domino that will fall. We know other member states are watching very closely what Ireland is doing. They then hopefully would follow suit, and then what happens is that the house of cards comes down in terms of Israel's impunity, because first we go after the illegal settlements, then we go after the preferential trade, the arms embargo, the sanctions, all of the tools that politicians have that they could be doing today. But I honestly believe if that first crack happens, other countries will be emboldened to take action as well.
So that was really the question I had for Lynn Boylan. There was, how come no EU countries stepping forward to sanction Israel? And Ireland was the closest. Yeah. But what's holding Ireland back? That's an interesting question. And her answer to that surprised me. What's holding Ireland back, the pressure coming on Ireland not to sanction Israel, is not coming from Brussels, Charles. It's coming from somewhere else. Listen to this.
And that's why you see such pressure coming on Ireland, particularly from the US, because of our long-standing relationship with the US. IPAC are pumping huge amounts of money into taking out op-eds in very high-profile newspapers. They are ramping up their politicians that are IPAC are supported by IPAC, sponsored by IPAC, and getting them to call Ireland anti-Semitic, to challenge Ireland's bill. But the reason why they're doing that is because they know this will be the downfall. The house of cards will collapse if Ireland takes this action, and that's why we have to hold fast. I mean, we have a lot of foreign direct investment in Ireland, a lot of major companies. This bill, though, would only affect 2 or 3 companies, but it's the Israel are no fools. They know the consequences of this bill passing means there's a domino effect, and that's why they're ramping up the pressure. They know Ireland's weak point is the link between the US, our long-standing relationship with the US, and that's why they are getting US politicians to do their dirty work and to try and keep the pressure on the Irish government. We know under the Biden administration that the ambassador to Ireland contacted our government and warned them of consequences if this bill was enacted. We know that our former finance minister, and now again current finance minister, he also gave commitments to Israel that this bill would never see the light of day. So this pressure is real, it's not imagined, and I think that for the government, they tried to withstand it for so long, withstand enacting the bill, but the people power and the pressure they're under now from the public means they have to do the right thing. Because we're being told that if we do this bill, that American companies will have to comply with America's anti-boycott, anti-sanctions laws. Our argument back is, well, one, there's only 2 or 3 companies that are involved, because most companies don't actually do business in occupied territories because they know it's toxic. But 2, that this is not Israeli land, so it can't be a boycott of Israeli products because this is Palestinian land. This is the proceeds of crime that Israel are committing by illegally occupying Palestinian land, and therefore it cannot be called a boycott of Israeli products. So the legal arguments are on our side. We know that, but the pressure is very real. It is coming from the US predominantly, but it's people power that have forced this bill to the point where it is now, where we've got a committee to recommend full ban on trade.
So they're very close. It's just a question, like she said, like Lynn said, the domino needs to fall. And the first domino is the Occupied Territories Bill, which has been like held up forever there. But Yasmin Ahmed, the UK director of Human Rights Watch, made an important point we didn't include because of time. But she said in 1982, Margaret Thatcher, she put a full arms embargo on the state of Israel for their aggression in Lebanon. So if Margaret Thatcher can do it, why can't Keir Starmer do it, Charles?
I think this is it. This is the question that will have bamboozled absolutely anybody, certainly anybody that's been watching UK Column over the last couple of years. But it's it's very interesting. You watch a meeting like this. It is quite clearly it's not a fringe issue. It's not a minority concern. And you listen to the language that's used by people who in fact don't have this agency. The words like must, governments must do this. And of course, on the other side, only this morning, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office were tweeting out about aid that must get in, that they must be given access to it. And yet they, in effect, have it within their gift to enforce that and don't. And we hear about the prospect of using military intervention, military force here, there and everywhere, but not in this particular situation. I'm not, of course, advocating for throwing more volatile content into that kind of an environment, but it is quite pathetic to hear people commentating from the sidelines, albeit that they are actually at the epicenter in the political arena, but they will do nothing.
Yeah, they'll do nothing. So we'll wait and see. Now, some people are doing something, Charles, and one of those countries is Slovenia. Just briefly, we'll bring this up on screen here. This is the latest in Europe, and this is Slovenia becoming the first EU country to ban arms trade with Israel. That is a full arms embargo against Israel. So just as we speak, this story breaks really over the last couple of days. So that's interesting. This comes on the heels of this, also from Slovenia. Slovenia bans Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, two of the most not so savory people walking the earth at the moment, from entering their genocidal for their statements that they made against Gaza. So that's interesting. So Slovenia has broken the door down here. And just on that note as well, Canada, who's been, virtue signaling about recognizing a Palestinian state this week. Well, as we revealed here in this report just filed yesterday, Canada's uninterrupted flow of arms deliveries to Israel through various third parties and back channels. So all of the details are there. But here's the real scam that is going to take place. Now take a look at this. This is very important to realize here. This is the new two-state solution push. Okay, everybody's on board now with the two-state solution. Finally, after so long of just abandoning anything because Israel didn't want it. But if you look at the details in here, it's quite damning. And we go into all the basic plans, and what they're trying to do is turn the Gaza into the West Bank. They're trying to West Bankify the Gaza Strip. And this is really the most important part. It's in the headline here from Frustration magazine. Love the title of that magazine here. Why does France want to recognize a demilitarized Palestine? So it's, again, have a trustee police force like the PA, the Palestinian Authority, under a puppet leader like a boss, or ruling over Gaza. So Israel in fact, Israel retains bigger control over Gaza in this new two-state solution that they're proposing. So it's basically, you can have a state in name, but zero sovereignty. And what this does is it brings negotiations back to square one again. And Israel's perfected this negotiation strategy for the last 40 years. They're brilliant at it. They know exactly, They run rings around the Western politicians. They've been doing this for a long time. They know exactly how to bring it back to zero while they change facts on the ground. And this is how we got to this point in the first place. Yeah. And I do not see anybody willing to basically put their foot down and call this for what it is. And that's my fear, is that all this push for a Palestinian state, I think, is just completely hollow. And this could actually get canned at some point in the next couple of months, because they'll say, well, the facts on the grounds have changed and we can't do that anymore. And that'll buy them another year. That's kind of where we're at.
I'm sure you're right. And certainly there'll be no interrogation of what you've just been describing by the mainstream media. So,
and you covered this amazing whistleblower from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, I think Anthony Aguilar is his name. He did another interview with an American podcaster here, or a gentleman here, which has gone viral on X. And the opening gambit, Charles, is quite something. Listen to this.
Very explicitly, directly to my face, that our client is the IDF.
Your client is the IDF.
Our client is the IDF. And this came out in a discussion once where I was in the control room. I was on I was on control room duty that day. We had shifted responsibilities on a rotational base. So I was in there that day with the radio observing site number 2 distribution. A Palestinian man had picked up some children to let them step on his shoulders to get onto a berm because they were being crushed in the crowd. Site 2 is very small, smallest of all 4 sites. And these children are being crushed, and he picked them up there and put them up on the berm. And the Israeli Defense Forces liaison officer in the main control center with us comes up to the screen that I'm watching, and he says, "Tell your men to get them down." I was like, "We got this under control." I was like, "I know they know what they're doing. No, they're children. Let's calm down. Get them down now, or I will." Well, there's no IDF on the site, so I didn't take it as much more than just being, bombastic and like, okay, like, hey, we got this. He leaves and goes to his desk in the operations center, and he gets on the radio and he speaks something on the radio. It was in Hebrew. I don't speak Hebrew. One of the contractors that was there was American that did speak Hebrew, and he notifies me. He said, "Hey, he just told the snipers at the IDF position, because the site number 2 is co-located with an Israeli base." He said, "He just told the snipers to take these kids out." I was like, "On the radio?" He's like, "Yeah."
I mean, do you need to hear any more? So Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, one of the mercenaries there, a decorated Green Beret, and probably who was pro-Israel before this assignment, not anymore. And what he said there, his client was the IDF.
Yeah.
His client was the IDF. I mean, that to me was quite a bombshell, and it really just kind of takes the mask off this whole fraudulent humanitarian operation that they're trying to pass off as trying to feed the Palestinians. It's just unbelievable.
Absolutely. I mean, there's been plenty of whispering about that, but to hear it said out loud like that is perfectly staggering. Patrick, thank you very much indeed for that. And we will, of course, discuss further what you've been dealing with in Extra. Now we'll go across to Mark, who's been looking at what's being discussed at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, specifically with regard to Iran's nuclear capability.
Hello, guys, and hello, viewers. The Chicago Council, the former Chicago CFR, I've been following them for about 15 years. They're one of the busiest think tanks in the U.S., as I've mentioned. And I covered this in real time virtually last Tuesday. So these are all original photos and it's firsthand coverage. The name of the program, The Middle East on Edge, What's Next for Iran, Israel, and the region. Of course, U.S. interests were mentioned. And one thing I'll mention right up front is Leslie Vinjamuri, shown to the left there. She's the new Chicago Council president. She took over for Ivo Dulder. She's fresh out of Chatham House. And I'm already detecting a little bit of more of a bias in favor of Israel, a little bit of a harder line tone for the programs here. It's a little early to tell for sure, but I'm detecting that a little bit. She's shown here with Rachel Bronson, one of the 3 speakers. Rachel's senior advisor at the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist, previously its president and CEO, overseeing its programming and its iconic Doomsday Clock. And we'll move forward from there. The Doomsday Clock, that's just a quick reminder of what it looks like. That's been with us a long time. Part propaganda, part reality, perhaps. It's from the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist, kind of a famous thing. But here's the other 2 speakers. All original photo screenshots. Shown here, we have left Robert Pape. We'll be focusing on him in a minute. University of Chicago political science professor. He directs the Chicago Project on Security and Terrorism, focusing on air power, etc. Then we have Ali Vaez, who directs the Iran project, and he's senior advisor to the president at the International Crisis Group. What is the Iran project? Very briefly, it supports principled democracy to prevent Iran, they say, from acquiring a nuclear weapon and avert military conflict in the Middle East. So the overall panel was pretty biased against Iran, pretty much looking out mainly for Israel's interests. Here's a summary. I have a summary of what they had to say. Robert Pape spoke of the Big 408. He referred to Iran allegedly having 408 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, not quite weapons grade, we're told. And he claimed Iran's only weeks away from 90%, allegedly worth 10 nuclear weapons, about 10 nuclear weapons worth, allegedly. But he asked, where's the 408 kilograms now? It's not known. Mr. Vayez, he said Iran has a victory narrative, Israel has a victory narrative, and in a way, so does the U.S. He said Iran responded with the most destruction in Israel since 1973. The damage is worse than assumed, he said. And he also announced that a UN resolution that endorsed the formerly U.S.-supported Iran nuclear deal expires in October. So that UN nuclear deal expires in October, the UN resolution that endorsed it, that is. And then Rachel Bronson claimed the ceasefire will hold because Israel's attack was so, quote, so consequential. And she said that Iran, in her view, is trying to find intelligence gaps, that is, that it can exploit. But from there, Euronews has picked up on this in recent times, claiming that Iran has amassed 408 kilograms of uranium enriched up to 60%. And this is according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, a branch of the UN watchdog. But of course, Iran claims it's for peaceful uses. And we haven't heard that much about the 408 kilograms. It's something that's kept kind of hush-hush, more or less. But here's Mr. Pape from the University of Chicago elaborating on that point.
I think the big number, folks, you should focus on is the number 408. 408. Iran had, at the end of May, 408 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. That was the core concern. They had 20%, they had 5%, but that 408 is what they need, what the 60%. They were only weeks away of moving that up to 90%. That 408 was the equivalent of 10 nuclear bombs. 10. And the estimates were they were somewhere between 5 and 8 months away. You'd have to enrich, you'd have to formulate it and to assemble the bombs and so forth. Well, where is that 408 today? We don't know. And that was always the core conclusion of every single one of those hypothetical bombing scenarios that we did. We would take out, with exquisite precision, every building standing above ground. Well, we pretty much did that. We would also take out, through what I called double tap attacks, that was my name for it, it wasn't even called a name 20 years ago, where GPS, the thing you need to know about GPS, folks, is it's three-dimensional. It's not just two-dimensional the way it is on your phone. So if the first bomb creates a crater, the second bomb can target that depth, another, and the third can maybe penetrate all the way through into those hulls. Well, the fundamental problem we were always going to face, that word futile, was we would never be able to verify that 408. And in this case, it's actually worse, because in the intervening time between the time Israel started the bombing and the United States bombed Fordo and Natanz, we know through satellite imagery, civilian satellite imagery, which is now exquisite, that there were trucks taking stuff out from Fordo.
So those are Mr. Pape's claims. He's, by the way, the author of a book called Bombing to Win from 1996, a curious title to say the least. But the only mention of Israel's arsenal or anything like that was very, very brief, just a passing comment at the end. So it seems like while there could be some truth to this, on the other hand, it could be largely or completely for peaceful uses. And at any rate, Israel always gets a pass on its arsenal and any inspections there, which never happen. So this was a kind of an unexpected thing to hear, for me at least, at this program, but an important thing to get out on the news. So back to you guys.
Thanks very much, Mark. I think important to point out that absence of evidence is not the same as evidence of absence, as it were. And I think those two things are very easily confused and conflated. I'm going to have a bit more on Iran later in the programme. But now what we're going to do is take a report from Will Coleshill, which concerns the Paloma Shemirani inquest. And he has been at that inquest over the past week, and he's going to present his findings now in recorded video, which deal exclusively with the sort of medical malpractice and medical ethics side of it, as well as possible breach of their own editorial guidelines by the BBC.
Hello, this is Will Coleshill reporting for UK Column. I'm here down at Kent and Medway Coroner's Court, where I'm reporting on the 5th day of the inquest into the death of Paloma Shemirani. Now, the court case is not done yet, but we have heard a significant amount of evidence. This case, of course, has been propelled into the spotlight because of the mother of Paloma, Kate Shemirani, who is, of course, a famous freedom activist. Considering the BBC pieces in terms of an article, a panorama episode, and also a podcast series by Mariana Spring, where they were framed to allege, especially in terms of accusations by Paloma's brother Gabriel, that is Kate's son, that Kate Shemirani had killed her own daughter. We've heard a significant amount of evidence from a number of doctors, and the key focus for much of this case so far has actually been whether Paloma had the competence to be able to make her own decisions, informed to choose alternative therapies rather than the mainstream conventional medical therapies. A lot of the original few days covered the inciting incident when Paloma first found a mediastinal mass in her chest and went to the hospital, where a number of things happened which seemed to undermine any trust Paloma would have had in conventional medicine. Now, Paloma obviously did have a background in alternative therapy, but there seemed to have been a number of alleged errors and malpractices that, at least in Paloma's views, according to her statements, have led her to distrust the NHS and conventional medicine and fear them and feel like she was being bullied. These include being denied a wristband and being administered drugs without consent, and then being pressured into signing a consent form for chemotherapy by doctors. Now, obviously, this is alleged at the moment, but backing this up was Paloma's own statements to the High Court. Indeed, it's quite a complex but very interesting case, because this is one of the few cases where we actually have the statements, very categorically, of the person in question into whom this inquest is being conducted. Paloma, despite this original incident happening in late 2023, around the end of the year, died in summer 2024 while she was currently in a battle with her brother over her medical autonomy and her capacity. During this time, she was spending some of the last of her money in order to fight her brother in court to maintain her medical autonomy and stay with her mother, pursuing alternative therapies. What's quite interesting is, despite multiple hours of coverage, an article, a piece by Panorama, and a 5-part podcast series, the BBC chose to omit Paloma's signed statements from their coverage. Now, why do I say that they chose to omit this coverage? It was quite interesting. The other day I was here and I spoke to one of the BBC employees who told me they were aware when they made them. Now, I was given an email. I have then submitted a line of questions to one of the producers at the BBC's BBC email address, and I've also forwarded this over to the BBC press office in order to have these questions answered. As of yet, at the time of recording, I've received no response to these questions, which do seem like the BBC has acted in a biased nature and breached their editorial guidelines as well as the BBC Charter. During this case, we've heard from a number of doctors who were in contact with Paloma who have confirmed her competence. Not only the initial doctor against whom much is alleged, Dr. Mohan, who confirmed Paloma's competence, but also her psychologist. And we saw many hours, I believe it may have been 5 or 6 hours of questioning, who again completely asserted Paloma's competence. We saw questioning of a hyperbaric oxygen therapist, and we also saw questioning of her GP. Now, all 4 of these doctors confirmed Paloma was competent, intelligent, and able to make her own decisions about her medical treatment. And that's what a lot of this comes down to. Whether Paloma had the right to choose her medical treatment and choose alternative therapy over conventional therapy, or whether because she chose that alternative treatment, it is highly likely she was being coerced. There have been some very interesting actions by the coroner presiding over the case. We've seen the coroner mute Kate a number of times. We've seen fireworks. We've seen mother and son essentially interrogating each other. One significant factor is we've actually seen some malicious action within this case. For one, I had a malicious allegation against me that I was somehow filming in the court when it would have been effectively impossible for me to do so, considering I was sat right at the front of the press room in front of a camera, live link to the main courtroom. Somehow I was meant to have filmed there. Obviously this is a spurious allegation, but clearly someone was trying to prevent alternative media coverage of the court case. I have reported this as a malicious accusation to the coroner, and this has been noted and accepted, but I'm waiting to see what comes of it, because clearly there is a huge amount of mainstream media interest here, but very little by the alternative media. A lot of what has happened so far has been determined by Paloma's competence, investigating it, and whether she was able to make her own decision. However, in the coming weeks, when we'll be back here again at this court, we're going to look at the days leading up to Paloma's death. We've already heard from a doctor who was there with Paloma at the end when she died. However, we're going to hear from the ambulance crew, and we're going to look at the administration of adrenaline, which Kate Shemirani is alleging killed Paloma by overloading her as she collapsed on that fateful day on July the 19th, 2024. We're yet to hear from the ambulance crews. Kate gave a very, very emotional but very strong statement condemning their action and the amount of time that they spent waiting around before going down to the hospital to try and treat her. And that is likely what these last few days is going to focus upon, on the actual events directly leading up to her death rather than her competence. However, what I think we've seen from these 5 days in court is a refutation of what the BBC has put out, at least in terms of the evidence that has been seen so far. The evidence overwhelmingly points to the competence of Paloma. So I believe there's a question to ask as to the BBC coverage, as to Mariana Spring, and as to whether anybody else who chose to take a natural treatment and happened to die would ever have this sort of coverage, or whether there are further agendas at play. Thank you. I'm Will Coleshill, reporting for UK Column News from Kent.
Will Coleshill there, and very many thanks to him for a really comprehensive report. And I'm sure you will have all formed your own view as to whether there are further agendas at play. But it seems completely remarkable that the censorship that we experience so much in what we do is actually playing out even in the coroner's court in real time. Completely extraordinary. But well done him for challenging the BBC. Now, to follow what he says, I would just remind you that the UK Column website is absolutely jam-packed with information on so many topics, but any of these things that are discussed in the news, and particularly the medical ethics issues that are raised in this inquest, can be examined in great detail on the website. So do go to the search function on the UK Column website to as your first port of call. I would also remind you that, of course, we are funded solely by donations from our viewers and indeed subscriptions from our members. And if you'd like to join, we'd be very pleased to have you on board. This is how you would do so. There's a great big button on the front page saying click here. So please do. And there are all the various options for membership. Now, on Thursday, yesterday, a sensational interview between Ben Rubin and Morgoth, centred on George Orwell's 1942 essay, England, Your England. It's gone out, being very well received. So please do listen back to that. Going out tonight, we've got the weekly banter session. Mike and I talking to Germ on the Germ Warfare programme at 7:00. And something else we've discussed in the main news programme is the petition to repeal the Online Safety Act, which is playing a huge part in obstructing the work that UK Column is trying to carry out, but also the very many other organisations occupying the space outside of the mainstream media. The petition, if you can't see it on screen, has now accrued nearly 500,000 signatures. So please do put your weight behind it, because it does pertain to our very future as an organisation.
And just the title, Repeal the Online Safety Act Petition. That's available where?
It is. That will be in the show notes, so there'll be a link to it. And please don't just sign it, but send it on as well. That would be terrific. And then upcoming events, we had Katie Jo on the programme on Wednesday, on Extra, that is, promoting her Freedom Music Festival coming up over the August bank holiday weekend. Now, there is a discount code UKC20, which will get you a 20% discount if you are going to book for that through hearing the information I've just given you. So please go to that. It would be absolutely sensational. And indeed, in October, we have our own event coming up, UK Column on location in the beautiful city of York. We are yet to announce our bevy of speakers, but we will start to do so fairly shortly. And I can tell you that you are in for a sensational day if you're going to be there. If you can't make it, then of course, live stream tickets are already available on the website. But if you're after an in-person ticket, I must remind you that nearly half of them are gone already, so they're selling fast. Please do not tarry. Kenny has helpfully put together a small video, which you're looking at now, which will describe how to buy your ticket via the shop. So we'll very much hope to see you there, or indeed have you on the end of the live stream. And that's coming up in October. But as I say, tickets on the website now. Now, I did say that I was going to be looking a little bit more at Iran. This is only a brief update. And of course, as Patrick's been articulating at the beginning of the programme, Gaza is quite rightly dominating most of the headlines. So the anti-Iran propaganda in the United Kingdom, at least, has been slightly muted recently, until yesterday, that is, when Hamish Falconer, the Minister for the Middle East and North Africa, took to Twitter to promote a statement about state threats from Iranian intelligence services. And he's referring to a joint statement issued by a number of European countries as well as the United States, which suggests that the Iranians are attempting to kill and kidnap people across Europe and North America. Now, the language used is loose, as the word threat conveys the sense that there is a declared intent by Iran, and indeed that such activities have actually taken place. But, of course, no evidence of any such thing is provided. Now, tellingly, it's a short statement, but there is a specific reference to the threat to, quote, Jewish citizens, end quote, as opposed to Jewish people, suggesting that being Jewish supersedes the confines of nationality, which betrays, one might think, the influences upon this statement being made in the first place. And this is also the time to remind you that Hamish Falconer was the man responsible for preparing the ground so busily for the American Top Gun-style bunker-busting attack on Iran's nuclear program, as it's being described, despite, as I mentioned at the end of Mark's report, the complete absence of evidence that the enrichment of uranium was for any purpose other than energy for the civil infrastructure. Now, watch this space as the rhetoric builds for what might be called a false flag attack. Very briefly, Patrick, what are your thoughts on this side of the Atlantic?
I mean, are you insinuating, Charles, that a Western government might cook up a weapons of mass destruction plot in order to give a pretext for another military act of aggression?
Yes, I think it's probably stronger than an insinuation, actually. I think that's exactly what I'm doing, and I think we will wait to see. Obviously, we've got the aircraft carrier, the Nimitz, in a, let's say, a vulnerable position as well. So where any of these things are going to happen or could happen remains to be seen, but it's a possibility, I think.
Yeah, and the kidnapping plot. I mean, this is just, there's been so many of these over the years, but the fact that they're trying to elevate these to sort of like national security, like
Yes.
5-star threat level is just kind of beyond the pale. But in a way, it's an act of desperation. But where's this going to end? Are we going to have a Russia-style hysterical moment in the West, but with Iran, like everything Iranian or linked to Iran, or, you know, Iranian restaurants, the food is suspect? That's how it was during Russiagate.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think we should expect all of that and more. But anyway, insofar as nefarious dealings with media reporting is concerned, we're going to go now over to Northern Ireland to hear from Mike about what the BBC has been putting out, and this time in relation to air turbulence.
Thank you, Charles, and welcome to sunny Northern Ireland. I'm just going to cover one very short topic today, and that is a BBC article. This is the second time that I'm aware of that they've done this thing. So let's just have a look at this. This is the article they published, Why Plane Turbulence is really becoming more frequent and more severe. So in the headline, they're absolutely clear that plane turbulence, much more common, much more severe than it's ever been in the past. And they put a graph on here, and you'll notice that the headline of the graph is turbulence-related passenger plane accidents in the US 2009 to 2018. Now, the definition of an accident with respect to turbulence is when somebody is injured in some way. So that might be because they've flown out of their seat and hit a luggage bin, for example, or have fallen while they've been walking up the aisle or whatever. So that's the definition of accident. It doesn't mean that an aircraft has crashed at all. But if you look at the graph there, you'll see, first of all, that they aren't listing years at all. They're listing months. So that isn't from 2009 to 2018, apparently. Well, they claim that this information is from the NTSB. But if we look in the article itself, and this is kind of indicative of the language that they're using, we can expect maybe in the future, perhaps this is based on models, it's based on assessments by so-called experts and so on. And they say if turbulence does get more intense, so this is not definitive. The headline suggests that it is, but actually the article is very, very clear that it isn't. So at the very least, the headline is a lie. The graph is perhaps a lie, certainly in the way that it's presented. So let's just remind ourselves of what the NTSB, this is the National Transportation Safety Board in the United States, says about turbulence. And this, as you'll see there, we've labeled as UKC Verify. Because this article or this report is called Preventing Turbulence-Related Injuries in Air Carrier Operations Conducted under Title 14, Code of Federal Regulations, Part 121. And if we look at the graph that they produce, the dark blue line at the bottom is the one which is referred as accidents with respect to turbulence. And you can see that line since, in fact, 1989 there is pretty much flat right the way across. There's been no increase in incidents of turbulence-related accidents. That's despite, as the BBC says in their article, the increase in air travel and the much more likely potential for coming across turbulence just by the fact that people are flying much more often. So that's it. I just couldn't let that particular report pass, even though I'm over in Northern Ireland today. So that's that for now. Back to you, Charles.
Thanks very much, Mike. And indeed, nor should it be let to pass by unquestioned, unscrutinised. And on the subject of propaganda and...
I'm disappointed in the findings of that report, Charles. I thought it was going to be climate change.
Well, but Patrick, let's just wait. I mean, there's plenty of time for that.
I feel empty inside right now.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Though, on the subject of propaganda, what's been happening in Slovakia?
Well, there's another organization, an NGO, that might sound familiar if you've been watching the UK column news. We'll bring this up on screen here. The Zinc network, what are they up to? British propaganda machine and its influence peddling in Slovakia's elections. Well, Declassified UK did a very good investigative report on Zinc's role in hiring and paying influencers to defame and try to influence and also to kind of derail the campaign of Robert Fico, this Slovakian leader. Obviously, he's against the war in Ukraine. That's always going to put him on the bad list as far as Western NATO goes. But yeah, Zinc, as Mike Robinson and others have pointed out, well, if you look at the funding from the FCO and so forth, it's a very well-funded organization. And this is what they get up to with the money. Surprise, surprise. So that's something to look at. And then just over quickly to the economic topic here. Donald Trump is continuing to weaponize tariffs. Okay, he's now threatening the BRICS countries. He's accusing them of enacting an anti-U.S. Agenda. So this is a bit like a vicious cycle for the U.S. here. I mean, the reason there is a BRICS is because of U.S. sanctions. And Donald Trump is, again, continuing to use tariffs as sanctions. And so this problem is just going to get worse and worse. And I don't really know if there's an exit door for this administration on this issue, but they don't seem to have anything else in the toolbox. So it's not looking good.
No, and I suppose, we just wait for the next instalment because it'll all change in a few minutes, presumably, possibly even by the time we've finished the programme. Now, sticking in the United States, we're going to go across to Mark because one of the reasons, or at least perhaps the main reason, that the COVID vaccines in particular were rolled out quite so widely with gay abandon was because there was a state of indemnity for all the manufacturers. And Thomas Massie is trying to deal with this in the United States. Mark, what exactly is happening?
Well, call this a spotlight on Congress for today. Of course, Ronald Reagan gave protection to Big Pharma back in 1986 with some things that he passed and signed. But Thomas Massie, the gutsy backbencher that still makes his voice heard despite all the pressure on him to shut up and to turn tail and run, he's pushing forward now. Not really a lone wolf, but he's doing this largely on his own steam. He doesn't have a whole lot of support yet. But this is him announcing the introduction of the PrEP Repeal Act. It's noted as H.R. 4388 to repeal sections 319F3 and 319F4 of the Public Health Service Act. These targeted sections are commonly referred to as the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness, or PrEP Act, and currently provides sweeping liability protections to pharmaceutical companies for pandemic-related products. And here's some of the main things that it does. I'll only touch on two. Let's put that up. It fully repeals the liability shields and the compensation fund provisions under this PrEP Act, and it restores civil remedy rights, under federal and state law for those harmed by pandemic products. So right now, according to Congress.gov, which is the Library of Congress, the main site for Congress, it doesn't have any co-sponsors yet. It was just introduced, but it's important to get this out there. Those overseas need to be aware of it, and American viewers, of course, need to take action if they're so inclined. Thomas Massie's personal website, well, his official website, that is for Congress, is very open to people calling. He has a very open policy, whether it's media or his constituents. And of course, non-constituents can call. It's not forbidden or anything like that, to call and voice their support and to learn more about his call for repeal of the PrEP Act. Here's a couple of his most important quotes. He had this to say, and this is interesting. I put emphasis on this. The PrEP Act is medical malpractice martial law. Interesting choice of words there. The 2005 PrEP Act prevents people from holding corporations accountable for the pain and suffering they cause during presidentially declared emergencies. An important caveat there. And moving on from there, one other quote from Mr. Massie. Again, I added some emphasis. Americans deserve the right to seek justice when injured by government-mandated products. The PrEP Repeal Act will restore that right, says the Kentucky Republican District 4. So he's putting it out there, very important stuff. It kind of supplements some of the other things going on that I've reported, where even Israel, as well as Italy, the United States, the Netherlands, Slovenia, and even Iran have signed letters that they're not taking part in the amendments to the international health regulations and the actual pandemic treaty, due to certain elements within the treaty itself, as I've noted, cannot be fully enacted until a little bit less than a year from now because of those provisions. And that's when the final signatures would be put into that thing, and only then would it be official. So we've got some time on the treaty. The regulations are wrapping up. That is, they're kind of drawing to a close where they're going to be pretty solidified, and yet there's still more and more opposition or questions about the international health regulations themselves. So I'll keep following this. It's very important to keep tabs on it over the long haul. So back to you guys.
Thanks very much, Mark. Yeah, it is indeed very important to keep that in mind, and good for Thomas Massie having a go. There will be monumental corporate pressure pushing back the other way against any efforts to repeal that act, one would imagine. Thomas Massie notable, of course, because he was also behind the Prime Bill, which concerned regulation for slaughter on a small scale for the sort of smaller American farmer. And that leads into a report I'm going to start now about food, because just a couple of weeks ago, the government put out a brace of documents about food, which are designed to give the impression that there is a central plan to improve the health of the nation at the same time as improving economic conditions for food producers and deriving a restored environment from the process. Labour's so-called plan for change is deployed yet again to make it sound like the pursuit or achievement of any of these things is both a novel idea and indeed within the gift of the government to give. Now, this is a crucial point because the good food cycle shown here refers to the, quote, amazing businesses, end quote, making this happen. And of course, the reality is that the big food and big agricultural businesses are able to drive the agenda, partly due to their corporate strength and lobbying power, but also because the government schemes, policies and subsidies are all designed to favour them above others. Now, the food strategy document put out on the same day makes the same sort of woolly claims, suggesting that food security and national security are inextricably linked. Now, that may well be the case, but as reported many times, the recent publication of the National Security Strategy, the Strategic Defence Review, as well as last year's Just in Case report for the National Preparedness Commission, demonstrates beyond all reasonable doubt that the UK is not in any way prepared for any of the types of shocks that it describes in any of these documents. Now, before going into more detail, there are two things to point out. Firstly, the term food security, which is bandied around all the time, only occurs 3 times on the statute book and never in a binding sense. It's only ever written down as a consideration when evaluating environmental schemes. And I think that makes the priorities here very clear. Secondly, the budget for agriculture in the UK this year, which has been described as the largest ever, is £5 billion. Now, it would take the National Health Service just 10 days to spend this much money. So I think you can decide whether you think the government is actually sincere on this issue. As to the content, it's been pointed out by many, including Farmers Weekly, that this plan does not involve animals. And having read the document, that is really the case. There are precisely 0 mentions of dairy or meat, but instead a reshaping of a diet in order that we all eat the same thing, regardless of the vast quantities of evidence suggesting that animals benefit the environment and, of course, that animal products are in fact vital for human health. The anti-nature agenda is covered on all sides, as evidenced by one of the latest emergencies. But to just draw out from the document, they're suggesting that we have the foundations of the economy at heart with this new food strategy, and that our diet should be higher in fruit, vegetables and whole grains, and of course that it supports our net zero commitments. But on the subject of emergencies, we are dealing yet again with blue tongue, or at least in this instance, and I've covered it many times, but just a reminder that the restrictions on movement are, of course, specifically crafted in order to encourage vaccination, even though, and as usual, the vaccines in question were given under emergency authorization. And it should also be pointed out that the people investing in fake meat grown in laboratories are exactly the same people investing in pharmaceutical products for animals, and further, that the volume of these products that goes to animals far outstrips that to humans. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious what the direction of travel is. Now, the other big issue, which of course will not go away, is population. And as recent statistics from the ONS suggest, and they are only estimates, but the natural population, as you can see on screen, dipping down relatively sharply to the right, whereas the migrant population is surging upwards with a estimated net inflow of nearly 700,000 for the previous year. So considering these factors, how the land is used could not really be more important. And I cite here the consultation live at the moment called Multifunctional Land Use. And they say that there's going to be a document produced from this consultation in October of this year. They cite the Royal Society's 2023 Multifunctional Land Use document, which reckons on, quote, an additional 4.4 million hectares of land, which is 18% of the total landmass of the UK, being needed to deliver net zero biodiversity and development objectives by 2050. So we're about to chime in with a...
Well, I was just going to ask you, Charles, with this food security agenda, how does that square with paying farmers not to grow food and the rewilding schemes that the government has been undertaking for, the last decade?
Absolutely.
How do those two things...
Well,
Are they
Patrick,
compatible?
I mean, neither you nor I works for the government, so we couldn't possibly comprehend such a thing. Exactly. This is the central question. And to qualify exactly what you're asking and what people will be thinking, what's called the utilised agricultural area in the UK is just under 17 million hectares. And so the croppable, what's described as the croppable area of that is around 6 million hectares. I've just had that confirmed by DEFRA this morning. And the area covered by arable crops from last year's statistics is not quite as large as the Royal Society is suggesting. And don't forget that the word they used was additional. So basically what they're saying is that there will be, were this to be rolled out and were croppable area to be used, which I know is a hypothetical, but that would leave precisely no land left upon which to produce crops in the way that they are now. Now, I don't mean that to sound alarmist, of course, but of course, worth pointing out also that DEFRA has delayed the publication of this year's statistics on land use, but last year there was a 107% increase in uncropped arable land as a direct result of the unlimited offering from the sustainable farming incentive. So it could well turn out to be the case that a lot less land is actually in production this year. Now, the answer for the countryside, as far as the government appears to be concerned, is to destroy it. And to pick out one example, we'll look at the way in which lithium battery technology has been deployed across the country. This is the mapping from the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. And first, we're looking at the figures as they were from 1990 with no developments in existence. Now, they're deemed hazardous by virtue of the fact they're unproven and that in the event of fire or an explosion, nothing will be done to mitigate, leading to a real environmental catastrophe. But this is what the map now looks like today. And indeed, the last image includes the proposed sites. If you're unable to see the screen, I've got a map of the UK with hotspots shown all over the place, with only exceptions really for mid Wales, the Highlands of Scotland and the Pennine area. So to reinforce the point about the sheer recklessness of doing this, I would point to the recent statement from Matson Shipping, a large logistics company based in Hawaii, which has said in a statement that due to increasing concern for the safety of transporting vehicles powered by large lithium-ion batteries, Matson is suspending acceptance of used or new electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid vehicles for transport aboard its vessels. Now, that's the end of the quote from that statement. I would say this really can't be brushed off. It's not a conspiracy theory. And this is at a time when, as reported on Wednesday, the government is now spending your money to subsidise the purchase of those very vehicles. So there's loads more to go into in terms of detail. And of course, we set it alongside the the ONS statistics that nearly 7,000 farming businesses are reported to have closed down in the year that we're currently in.
And on that blue tongue issue, I was speaking with an organic farmer, local in Devon, that specializes in livestock, and they try to stay organic. But if the government says there's blue tongue in the area, they have to vaccinate their animals. Otherwise, they get the risk of being shut down.
Exactly.
So that's what's actually happening behind the scenes.
Yep.
So even though they want to stay organic and they don't vaccinate their animals, the blue tongue scare has opened the door for government to lean on. And I obviously I don't want to say the name of the farmer, but this is the conversation that's happening on the countryside.
No, the pressure is intense, and it is in effect they're rolling out now exactly what they tried to do with human beings during the COVID period, which was to say that there can be free movement on the condition that everybody has received a pharmaceutical product. And it's exactly what they've done. So the blue tongue restriction zone has been expanded to cover the whole of the UK, which means that free movement has in effect been granted, but under those very conditions. You're absolutely right. Now, what I would say in terms of, as a member of the audience, your relationship and with regard to food and all the rest of it is that the farming section on the UK Column website is absolutely full of interviews with people who have a vision, but that's founded on reality and a way to achieve what the government pretends to be doing, but without destroying anything in the process. So that concludes the food sort of report for today. And we're now going to go back to Mark, because you're going to tell us about what's been going on in terms of mass media power and sort of further consolidation and how that presents a threat to all the smaller players.
Yes, time is tight, so I might make this kind of a cliffhanger, but Sun Valley, Idaho, each year is where the Bilderberg Jr., you might say, confab takes place. I have a slide from one of the more gossipy news organizations. In fact, the gossip news organizations provide the main coverage and ironically often do a better job than what any mainstream media coverage might come along. This one from Deadline, dated July 9th, right when Sun Valley was taking place. Touching down in Sun Valley, can moguls find answers to media's pressing questions amid the Ponderosa Pines? It shows Warner Brother Discovery's David Zaslav and Disney's Bob Iger. Disney owns ABC, of course. They're arriving there. Now, what's interesting is in the next slide, and like I say, I'll probably have kind of a cliffhanger that we can talk about in extra, but what happened at Sun Valley 2025 by Fast Company, another sort of gossip rag, 14 July, as this thing was really kicking into high gear. Likely acquisition of the Free Press, an online media source, by Skydance Media. And David Ellison, who's Skydance's CEO, David Ellison. And yes, he is the son of Oracle's Larry Ellison. He attended Sun Valley alongside Miss Barry Weiss. That's a lady, Miss Barry Weiss, who's a center-left pro-Israel Free Press co-founder. But the New York Times learned that if Skydance purchases the Free Press and Skydance wants to purchase Paramount, which owns CBS, in a huge deal, $8 billion. So there's two purchases going on. And yet the Times is saying that if Skydance purchases the Free Press as well as Paramount, then Miss Weiss could take a major role in shaping the CBS News editorial direction. And she's very pro-Israel, very interesting there. So that's some of the goings on. There's another kind of juicy item. I'll save that for extra in the interest of time, having to do with more details about Skydance buying Paramount, which owns CBS, and some of the machinations there. So that should do for now.
Super. Thanks very much, Mark. And a rare cliffhanger there for the UK column audience. So look forward to that in extra. Now, we're just going to close out the programme by looking at what's going on in the civil service, because the BBC have announced that they are going to be looking at working class people for interns, however exactly the BBC or indeed the civil service describe such a thing. This seems to come from the 2016 document, Socioeconomic Diversity in the Far Stream. So I thought we would go to a place where we can wind the clock back a little bit as to exactly what the purpose of a civil servant really is or should be.
Makes me feel rather downcast. If it's our job to carry out government policies, shouldn't we believe in them?
What an extraordinary idea.
Why?
Bernard, I have served 11 governments in the past 30 years. If I'd believed in all their policies, I would have been passionately committed to keeping out of the common market and passionately committed to going into it. I would have been utterly convinced of the rightness of nationalizing steel and of denationalizing it and renationalizing it. In capital punishment, I'd have been a fervent retentionist and an ardent abolitionist. I would have been a Keynesian and a Friedmanite, a grammar school preserver and destroyer, a nationalization freak and a privatization maniac, but above all, I would have been a stark, staring, raving schizophrenic.
So I don't know that it necessarily matters which socioeconomic group you believe you belong to, but that's a good note to end on, I think. So very many thanks to Mark and to Mike for joining us on the live link, and indeed for Patrick joining me in the studio. Thanks very much. And please do make sure that you spend the weekend thinking about getting your ticket for, first of all, Hope Freedom, as well as the UK Column event in York. And indeed, don't forget that the Germ Warfare banter session goes out at 7 o'clock tonight. If you are a member, do join us in a few minutes for extra. If you're not, please consider joining us as a member. Otherwise, I hope you have a lovely weekend, and we will look forward to seeing you on Monday for the news programme at 1 o'clock. Bye-bye.